What is up, fam? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Tip and I'm so excited that you are here. Happy September. Are we feeling the spooky vibes? Are we decorating for fall? What are we doing? Let me know down below. I know for me, as soon as September 1st came around, I was ready to set up for fall. I have some of my decorations up. I'm still purchasing some DIYs coming onto my channel and onto my TikTok. So actually, a shameless plug for my TikTok. If you're not following me there, it is linked down below. I am on there on the daily, and so I'm always sharing my life and what I'm doing and figuring out who I am. So join me down there if you're interested in that. I also have an Instagram. I update on there on a daily basis, so feel free to check that out as well. So let's get into what I read in the month of August. I do have some notes, so if you see me looking over here, that's what I'm looking at. But I want to share a little bit of me getting back into reading. So I typically will pick up reading and set it down. I really love reading in the months of fall and winter. It's very cozy, it's rainy outside. You know the vibes, like, you know the cozy girl vibes. And so that's what I'm aiming for. But I'm actually trying to push myself to read consistently as a hobby throughout the entirety of the year. So August was my first month of initiating that plan, and I was able to pick up 4 books, which I was so happy about, and I even read a book that is very near and dear to my heart. So I can't wait to share that with you. But that's a little bit of kind of my reading goals. I'd like to consistently read from month to month. The amount of books per month is definitely up for whatever. It could be 1 book, 2 books. I'm sure I'll challenge myself more and more as time goes on, but for now it's just about getting back into reading, expanding my mind. I love learning new words, learning definitions, immersing myself into like other stories and getting my mind working. So that's why I enjoy reading. The other thing that I was able to pick up along the way of reading is I have figured out what genre I like. I can finally say with confidence at this point in time, I'm sure it's going to change, that I love horror, suspense, thriller, detective type books, and see where I end up at. So, final thoughts, and I'm going to share with you what I read in the month of August and what I rated everything. Where did I fall? Let's see. So let's continue with the video. The first book that I picked up was The Outsiders by Stephen King. I wanted Stephen King to kind of be like my guiding light in stepping through like the suspense horror type of genre. And so I was like, you know what, I'll start with Stephen King. He'll be my starting point and I'll kind of web out from there. So I picked up The Outsiders. I've heard great things about it, and I too fell in love with this story. Not fell in love, but was just captivated by this story. The story starts out with an 11-year-old boy who is found at the local park, brutally murdered. The scene is investigated, DNA is sent off, and we end up finding out right away that there's a positive match, but not just a positive match, no. A positive match to the city's local Little League baseball coach. And so as soon as those results come back in, this immediately becomes personal for the lead detective, Ralph Anderson. Detective Anderson is on the case. He does a very public type of arrest for the Little League baseball coach. His name is Terry Maitland. So he does a very public arrest, gets him into that interview room, only to find out that Terry Maitland has a rock solid alibi. So Ralph Anderson is taken aback by this. He's like, how in the world is this possible? And so we're taken through the story of what happened, who did it, how did Terry Maitland end up being able to be in 2 places at both times. And then we're hit with another shocker right off the bat. Terry Maitland dies. He is shot and killed on the front steps where he is about to be convicted of this crime. So he's killed by an angry mobster, and so we don't even get answers from Terry Maitland himself. We have to start figuring this out while he is passed away, while we have this murder to solve. And so we are completely captivated and taken in. My mind was doing front flips and back flips, trying to figure out, like, how was this man in 2 places at one time? Like, logically, how did this happen? Spiritually, how could this have happened? Like, I was trying to get ahead of Stephen King, and he still got ahead of me. Because he's a good author. He knows what he is doing. And so I gave this book a 3 out of 5. And you're like, How? I thought you loved it. I did, but the ending was so lackluster. I am such an endings type of person. Like, I want a big ending, I want an in-depth ending, I want all my answers, and I want them right now. And you would think that I don't get that often, but I get that very often from books. And so I was really hopeful that I would get this from The Outsiders, and I wasn't. The story ends with just us being given like this rushed ending, and then that's it. And I'm like, I have questions. I want to know more. And so 3 out of 5 because it was a great storyline, but the ending was so disappointing that I couldn't look past that. My second read for the month of August was The Institute by Stephen King. I had this book on my TBR, and so I was like, you know what, I'll follow it up with another Stephen King and we'll see how this goes. So I had actually previously read this book around the time that it came out in 2018, 2019. I had picked it up, but I had only read about halfway through before I had to return it to the library. So it had been so long, I decided to just start from the beginning, and I'm so glad that I did. In this book, we follow our main character, Luke, who was kidnapped in the middle of the night by a government entity who claims that he has special abilities. And even though Luke is somewhat of a child prodigy, he is wicked smart. He isn't really aware or doesn't really know like what this government entity wants with him. And so him and it's all kids, adolescent kids, they are put into this institute and they're poked and prodded and researched and like challenged to do different things with telekinesis and telepathy. And so this group of kids, Luke being our main character, but this group of kids comes together and they take on the task of trying to figure out what's going on and how to bring it down. Alongside that storyline, we briefly touch on a storyline of, I believe his name is Tim, I don't really remember, but he's an ex-cop that ends up finding his way down to like some small town in South Carolina, and their paths end up crossing. They need each other's skills, and they end up making such a great match. This book was rated 4 out of 5. I wanted to give it 5 out of 5. I did. My heart was set on a 5 out of 5, but the 4 out of 5 was picked because, again, this ending, I wanted more answers. This was such a captivating story. Like, it was so interesting. It was kind of like, if you're a conspiracy theorist, like, this is interesting for that way too. This is such an engaging story just because you're like, oh my gosh, like what if this is actually real? What if this actually happened? Like, this is totally plausible. So you're sucked into the story, the characters, and then the ending comes and you're like, but what about this and this and this? And like, what are answers here? And I wanted more from the characters. Like, this would have been so good if there was, I don't even think a second book, if it was just a little bit longer so that it could expand on the questions that I had. So again, leave down below what you thought about this book, but it gets a 4 out of 5 in my opinion because that ending should have been a little bit better. So here's where I'm going to pose a question. Is Stephen King always like this? Are all of his endings like this? I picked up Billy Summers. I felt that way about that ending, and I have one of Stephen King's books on next month's TBR, well, this month, September. And so I'm really hoping this isn't a thing because I have about 5 Stephen Kings that I want to read, and I really hope that I'm not disappointed every single time. He's such a good storyteller, but his endings are not my thing. Not my thing. Anyways, book number 3 that I picked up was the last of the really great WHANGDOODLEs. This was a childhood book for me. So in 3rd grade, it was a rough year for me that year, but in 3rd grade, my teacher would, after lunch, she would bring us in, we would sit on the carpet, and she would read to us for about half hour. And I can only ever remember this book that she read. I distinctly remember like the friends that I sat by. I'm still friends with, her name is Katie, I'm still friends with her, and we talk about this book because we remembered it. And so in high school, one day in conversation, it came up like, do you remember that book that Mrs. Smith read? And we were like, oh my gosh, yeah, I loved that book. And so I vowed to myself that I was going to read it at some point in time. I was going to reread it so that I could re-enter this story. So what this book is about is a professor, a college professor, ends up coming into contact with 3 little kids. Honestly, the storyline sounds a little sketchy, I'm not gonna lie. He comes in contact with 3 little kids and he tells them about the WHANGDOODLE, which is an imaginary creature, and he ends up taking them on to mentor them so that he too can go and see the Whangdoodle, which is in their imagination, but he like mentors them, and it's a 3rd grade book, so like follow the train of thought, right? And so the kids go and they meet with him, and they expand their imagination, and they face all these obstacles, and then in the end they end up meeting the Whangdoodle. And it is such an incredible book. Such an incredible book. If you're a teacher and you're able to read this, I would highly recommend reading this to your class, because it touches on so many different topics, lessons that kids should learn, ways that you should handle situations, how to interact with siblings and resolve like sibling quarrels and stuff. It's just such a cute book. So good. And surprisingly enough, this book is by Julie Andrews Edwards, which is Julie Andrews that we know from Mary Poppins and The Sound of Music. She wrote this. She's written 2 books, this being one of the 2. And this was written back in 1974. But I really wish she would have kept writing, because she is actually a really good storyteller, like incredible. So if you actually like reading, like I know some people will read like middle grade books or like read elementary school books, or like I said, if you're a teacher, this would probably be like a really good book to dive into. But for me, this is like a sentimental, personal read, and of course, it was 5 out of 5. Like there was nothing wrong with that one. 5 out of mother freaking 5. And the 4th and final book that I picked up was Finding Me by Viola Davis. So I want to tell the story because I don't know, I want to tell the story of how I found this book. So me and Jeremiah were going through the mall, and I really wanted to find a Barnes & Noble. They didn't have one, so we went to this place called Books A Million. And so I go in there, and I end up finding a book that I had been wanting to read for a while, for a couple of years. And so I told Jeremiah, like, oh, this is a book I want. So we left, we watched a movie, and then we came back. And when we came back, I was walking to go to the front to pay, and I saw the Finding Me cover. And in the movie theater, I had just seen the trailer for Viola Davis's new movie coming out in the next few months. And so I was like, I love her. Like, ever since I watched The Help, I feel like she has such a presence on screen, and she's so, like, she communicates what she's trying to communicate, like, just so perfectly in her acting. Like, I just find her to be a really great actress. And so I immediately put my other book back, picked this up, and I read it in a day. I couldn't put it down, and that is unlike me. I also bookmarked the hell out of it because she just had so much just knowledge and wisdom. I'm getting chills thinking about it. That she tells in her story. Viola Davis was a woman who was born into extreme poverty. She's a black woman, so she faced a lot of obstacles racially. And not only that, but she was trying to get into an industry. The acting industry is very difficult, very difficult. And I've read a few memoirs on actresses who have talked about kind of the start getting into the acting world. And so I could only imagine how she came from not a privileged position in the slightest way, and yet she like picked herself up and got her to where she is now. And she tells her story in a very raw and vulnerable way. It's very family heavy, so we hear about the addiction issues that she faced and the relationships that she's had with her family, like her parents and her siblings. And you're so, like, you're there with her. I felt like I was cooking a meal with her. Like, you know how like you're sitting alongside someone and you're just like doing a task together, but they're telling you their story and like opening up to you? This, I don't know how she did that, because I'm not an emotional reader, I would say. I mean, maybe I am, but I wouldn't say that I'm an emotional reader. And this book, I was just like, she's my new friend. Like, she is my new BFF. I love her. And so this was a 5 out of 5 read for anyone who loves memoirs, who is looking to be inspired, who likes the entertainment world, getting into acting, anything of that sort. Pick this up. If you're someone who enjoys reading about people's upbringings, if you like Viola Davis as an actress, pick this up. If I ever hear someone who's interested in acting or being in the entertainment world of any sort, whether that's on social media or anything, I would recommend this book. It's just the I feel like Viola Davis is the true definition of grit. Never giving up, making it work. And the way that she communicates this is in a way where you don't feel like she's talking at you, like she's just giving her life story. No, she's taking you through it. You're walking through her life, you're feeling what she felt, and you're there in the moment. And so what an incredible woman she is to not only communicate emotions on a big screen, but also through her words. I was just 10 out of 10. 10 out of freaking 10. I love it. That is what I read in the month of August. I would say this was an excellent start to my reading journey. I was enlightened with Viola Davis. I was taken back for a sentimental ride with the last of the really great WHANGDOODLES. And then Stephen King is really just fulfilling the way my mind likes to just keep on moving and keep on turning. So stay tuned for later this week when I share what my September TBR is, so that you know what I'm reading for this month. And I'm hoping to read 5 books this month. So stay tuned for that video. But again, if you want to follow me on TikTok, that's linked down below, along with my Instagram. And also, I've linked my GOODREADS down below. I recently went through and did a huge cleanup. So feel free to go through that, see what I read, what I'm reading, and what I hope to read in the future. So I hope you guys have a wonderful week. You are awesome and you are beautiful. I'll talk to you later. Bye.